Yeah. Starting in a minute or so.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, we are live and recording. Wonderful, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. This is our regular council meeting for Tuesday, February 18th. Before we begin, just remind you that we do have members who will be joining us from Zoom as well as from within the chambers. So as is always the case, please use your hand if you want to speak to something, and I will call on you to speak to it at the appropriate time. Also, the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the Township's YouTube channel. So just be aware of that. We'll begin with calling the roll. We have Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Present.
We have Councillor Watt.
Present.
We have Councillor Johnston.
Present.
Myself, Heather Watson. Councillor Board has sent regrets for this afternoon's meeting. We do have a number of staff, basically all of our senior managers who are joining us as we will be talking about budget today. So we'll go through and introduce those folks. We'll introduce them as they're called upon. So with quorum of council in attendance, I'll now call the meeting to order, beginning with the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on lands which are part of the 1818 Treaty 20 and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe bands of the Great Ojibwe Nation. We offer our gratitude to the Ojibwe for their care and knowledge of the lands on which we work, live, and enjoy. May we honor and respect their teaching and our treaty obligations as we grow together. And we'll just pause for a moment of silent reflection. Okay, moving along. Of course, the agenda was distributed in advance to council. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing nothing, could I ask for a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Johnston, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes and business arising from minutes, simply the regular council meeting minutes from February 4th. The motion on those, Deputy Mayor Nelson, seconded by Councillor Watt, all in favor? And that motion also carries. We have two items on consent. Is there anything that a member would like to hold for discussion? I'd like to hold item 7.2, County Skid Row notice of public open house and public meeting. And we'll carry that down to 12, I believe, Madam Clerk, under correspondence. So if we can address that as item 12.3. I appreciate that. Councilor Johnson.
Through the chair, I got one question on the meeting of January, and then just reading through it. It kind of makes sense to me. And they called for the court vote on the picking up the garbage, and the recorder said it was 11 to 7 something. There isn't that many members there. I wonder how they got that number. So I think if you read it, it was 6 to 2 or 7 to 2 or something.
Right, so that's the county council meetings of January 22nd. Just for clarity purposes, we can address that now. There's weighted voting at county council. So there are 2 members at county council whose votes account for 2.
Oh, I see.
So 1 vote is 2 points, if you will.
Okay.
So you'll get the uneven numbers. And then I don't know about that meeting in particular, Deputy Mayor Nelson, you may recall, if we were all leaving in attendance, there may have been some recent regrets that would throw off the balance there.
Yes, I believe that probably would be the answer, the reason why.
I was just counting. Way out of whack.
Didn't add up to 16, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Fair enough, thank you. So with that, then, could we just get a motion to receive item 7.1?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston, second by Councillor Watt, all in favor, and that motion carries. Okay, on to delegations, petitions, presentations, of public meetings. We do have a public meeting. So for that, we'll need to open the meeting, open the public meeting. Councillor Watt, second by Councillor Johnston, all in favor, that motion carries. And with that, I will hand it over to our CAO. Mr. Davis, where's he goes?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, members of the public. Tonight I will be providing the commentary on the public meeting relating to zoning bylaw amendment file R1424, public meeting report planning 2025-03, related to the property address at 1006 Stony Lake Island 35. The subject property is currently zoned island residential or in the island residential zone and shown on schedule B7 of the bylaw number 10, 1996 as amended. The owner desires, the reason for the rezoning is the existing lot of record is 0.59 hectares in size. It is developed, we're currently developed with a dwelling, an attached deck, frame shed, metal clad accessory building, a garden shed, and a boathouse. The existing dwellings and attached deck are non-compliant with the water yard setback of 13.8 meters to the principal dwelling and 9.6 meters to the deck at their respective closest points. The purpose of this rezoning is the owner desires to construct a 46.73 square meter 3-season room to the south of the existing dwelling. Attached to that room, an approximately 3.34 square meter attached deck with stairs to the east, and a 26.38 square meter attached deck and stairs are proposed to the west of the addition. Since the subject property is located on the peninsula of an island, the proposed addition deck stairs do not meet the minimum water setback requirement of 30 meters. And so that is the reason we need to, the application for rezoning has been brought forward to the township to recognize the current deficiencies already existing on the property and to permit the other development, recognizing that that development will not be located closer to the high water mark than the existing development on the property. The proposed amendment is to rezone the subject lands from Island Residential Zone IR to the Special District Zone 114 zone to permit reduction of the 30-meter water yard setback, recognizing the deficient water yard of 13.8 meters to the principal structure, 9.6 meters to the existing deck and stairs. And the rezoning will recognize the existing deficient lot area of 0.59 hectares and will limit the maximum area for all existing and proposed open decks and stairs to 97 square meters. It should be noted that all other applicable zone provisions of the bylaw 10/1996 as amended will continue to apply. This rezoning application conforms with the notices requirements of the Planning Act. Circulation by regular mail to all properties located within 120-meter radius of the subject parcel was achieved. The notice was posted on the municipal website, and signage was posted where practical. So traditionally that signage would be posted on the property, but considering that that property is an island, we posted signage at Little's Landing Marina, the entrance to 918 Gilchrist Bay Road, and at the interchange of County Road 6 and Little Lake Road. The rezoning application conforms with the Provincial Policy Statement 2024. It should be noted that the pre-consultation occurred for this rezoning application under the previous growth plan and provincial policy statement. In that context, ORCA made the following comments and requests that the proposal is that the proposed area, or noted that the proposed area is outside the floodplain, that they required or requested a planting plan And I would note that a shoreline restoration plan was submitted in support of this application. That there is, they noted that there is a species at risk on the property. However, it's not part of the, it's not in the envelope for development. And that no natural, based on the type of construction that was proposed, no natural heritage evaluation would be required. February 4 comments came back from Orca with regards to this application. The application, and they maintain that the application is consistent with Chapter 5 of the Provincial Planning Policy Statement 2024. That no significant heritage features are on or adjacent to the subject property, and that it's consistent with all provisions of PPS 2024. Further, the zoning application demonstrates conformity with the official plan. The property is designated seasonal residential environmental constraint. The proposed addition is located in the land's designated seasonal residential. Preservation of the naturally vegetated shoreline is encouraged and supported with the submission of the shoreline restoration plan. The rezoning will also, in this instance, recognize the existing deficiencies on the property. The water yard setback of 13.8 meters to the principal structure and 9.6 meters to the existing deck and stairs will be recognized. In addition, they'll recognize the size of the lot at 0.59 hectares. The new addition will be located 28.3 meters from the high water mark and the deck 18.5 meters, demonstrating that it is well beyond the current setback. And the addition will not further encroach on the 30-meter setback. There were comments from the public that I would note. One member of the public requested the meeting link, is in attendance this evening and has requested the notice decision, as is their right. Enbridge provided a comment with no concern. Orca provided comments that were outlined earlier in my presentation. And Curve Lake Nation provided comments. They recognize that with very little soil disturbance, it was not necessary to conduct an archaeological study. And they have requested that if archaeological resources are located through the construction period, that Curve Lake First Nation would be contacted and those materials we provided tonight. In conclusion, staff support the proposed rezoning application, as it is our opinion that it meets the intent of both the municipal and provincial policies. I'm happy to take any comments or questions from council or.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. On that, is there anyone either in the gallery or on Zoom who would like to comment or question on the application?
Good evening. My name is Holly Richards Conley, and I am the agent for the owners, and I am just available for any questions that council may have.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Any questions from the gallery at all? And then clerk, just to confirm, is there anybody on Zoom waiting? No, on the agent, just the agent. Thank you. Okay, so with that, any questions from council at this point on the application? Councilor Johnston?
Just one question through the chair. It looks like basically the whole area is all rock. Am I right to say that?
I'd like to take that.
Through the chair, Councilor Johnson, I believe you're correct. There isn't a lot of soil to disturb, which is why Curve Lake First Nation doesn't have a lot of concern.
Councilor Watt?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I always get confused, and I apologize for that, but the difference between getting a minor variance and getting a rezoning is it my understanding that rezoning is going to encase the whole thing, not just the new structure that a minor variance would do? This is going to bring everything into compliance? Is that the subject here?
Through the chair, Councilor Watt. So certainly, I mean, when we weigh what a minor variance versus a rezoning, it's usually related to this nature of the request or the planning application. Minor variances oftentimes are distinctly that minor in nature. They must meet 4 simple tests to demonstrate the minor nature of that. But your comment is not incorrect. What this does is it recognizes the entirety, rezones the entirety of the property into a special district zone and recognizes the current deficiencies to the zone standards that exist. So reality is that in layman's terms, and the best way that I could describe it is that the structure on the property, its decks and stairs do not currently conform with the zone standards. And so by going through this process, what we are doing is recognizing what exists there currently is not in conformity. We're also pointing out that what is proposed, is not any less in conformity than what is currently in existence.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from council on the application? Nope, seeing nothing.
Motion to close public meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson, seconded by, I see none from Councillor Watt. All in favor? And that motion carries. Now, council, we do have the option with your support to move item 13.1, which is the bylaw. Move that up and address that now. So, oh, I'm sorry, we do need to receive the information first. Let's start there. Deputy Mayor Nelson?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Watt, all in favor? And that motion carries. Now we move on to bylaw, item 13.1. If council would like to move forward with getting that passed, so feel free for
Yeah, I'll make
that.
the motion to.
Councillor
pass
Johnson,
the bylaw.
thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? And that motion is approved. Thank you very much. And thanks for your attendance, Ms. Richards-Connolly. Okay, so moving down the agenda on to item 9, our public comment period. So since the agenda was posted last week, we have had 2 people register to speak, starting with the Douro-Dummer local taxpayers. I don't have a speaker name, but if you're to speak on item 10.5, inclusive of 10.5.1 and 10.5.2. So speakers on from the Douro-Dummer locals to present. Okay. So then moving on to, sorry, just put my page here onto our second speaker. Whose name are which? We have Matthew Corey here to speak on item 10.3, the severance application B118-24. Eddie, report.
I'm here online, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and you're here on behalf of Yancy Eddie, is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I spoke with my client, Mr. Eddie, this afternoon and agreed that I'd speak on his behalf.
Wonderful. The floor is yours. I believe you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will endeavor to be much shorter than that. Good to see you all. Good afternoon. I guess it still is, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Matthew Corey. I'm with the planning firm Malone Given Parsons. We're helping the Eddies with pursuing a severance at 649 Forbes Lane. We did put in the initial application, and I think there was a fair bit of discussion with the staff on this prior to the application coming in. Unfortunately, the gentleman, Giuseppe, who was dealing with it, is no longer with the company that was helping out the Eddies. So we lost some institutional knowledge. We're helping with that, and we helped put in the application. We just received all the comments on it. And this is, of course, item 10.3 on the agenda, the severance application B118-24. I did have an opportunity earlier this afternoon to speak with Ms. Chait Hartwig. I think there is some significant issues raised in the staff report on the proposed severance, but I also think there's a lot of room for us to work with the staff to resolve many of those issues and to produce any additional work that's required to have those be assessed, especially the Conservation Authority's comments on floodplain. We are undertaking work to do that. So what I'm here tonight, very basically, is to respectfully request from council that this report be deferred to give us more time to work with staff to try to resolve as many issues as possible before it comes back before council. So with that, Madam Mayor, that's very simply the request. I think we can work quite nicely with your staff to try to resolve some of these things before you see it again. Just asking for that opportunity, please, and thank you. And absolutely here to answer any questions you may have.
Understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Corey. So I'm sure our clerk had advised the public comment period is such that, we can certainly ask you questions, and then as we go down the agenda and address that item, council will take that into consideration. We're not going to be able to pump that item up at this point in time for discussion, but it's only a couple of items in on the agenda. So, council, before Mr. Corey departs from speaking from the comment period, are there any questions of Mr. Corey at this point in time? No? Okay. So thank you for your delegation and for your comments, and we will carry on with our agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so on to staff reports. We have item 10.1, the report and capital project status. And council, are there any questions of staff on that report? Seeing nothing, simply a motion to receive that. Councillor Johnston, thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor, and that motion carries. On to item 10.2, we have severance application B-104-24 and B-105-24 for Edwards report. And Mr. Davis, looks like you're going to be presenting that one today.
Thank you to the mayor, to the members of council. I'm going to provide some comments on the severance review application or report authored by our planner, or retired planner, Christina Coulter. I think the report is generally straightforward. However, I want to highlight a couple of items before we get too far into it. So the severance application proposes the creation of 2 residential lots located at 2075 Demers Road, part lot 27, concession 1, Dummer. The property is eligible to be severed. However, the application is in review by the planning staff, our planner. It is not supportable primarily because it proposes 2 lots with frontage on Demers Road, sorry, which is not a municipally assumed or maintained road. The report sort of outlines that in order to be supportable, there's one of 2 options, generally or fundamentally. The Edwards have the right or opportunity to apply for an official plan amendment to amend that particular policy in the official plan, or they can ask for the township to assume Demers Road by bylaw. Currently, the municipality or the township has not assumed this road. We do not provide maintenance, either winter maintenance or ongoing maintenance of that road. I would also point out that section 3.12 of the township zoning bylaw prohibits erecting a building or structure unless it fronts a public road. The Edwards have a structure on their property under section 3.12.3. They used an exception in the zoning bylaw that allows existing vacant lots that were created prior to 1983 that do not front a public road, that they could be granted a building permit. And in the report, it outlines in the report that in that process, the Edwards acknowledged that they were not on a public fronting road when they made their application for building permit. There are a number of other items that are managed or addressed through the severance report. However, I think the fundamental issue with the fact that it doesn't front a public road is the one that is what drives the decision or the recommendation by the planner in our review. I would also remind council that this body does not grant severances. It is actually granted by the planning authority at Peterborough County. We are simply providing a recommendation to Peterborough County, and in the recommendation of our planner is not to support this application. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davis, any questions from council on the report? Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, with the 2 conditions you said about would they have to bring the whole road up to standard, or just right up to their place, to the severance? I know that I don't know where they would do a turnaround, if that was brought up to a standard just to their seven lot one. But I'm just wondering, would they have to do a whole road or just to that?
Through the mayor, Councilor Johnson, I honestly, I think that traditionally, we would ask them to bring the road up to standard to the lot in question, not the entirety of them.
Or just to the,
From the entrance to the entrance to the road to the entrance to their property, including the entrance of their property on that.
okay, then have they decided to do one or the other? Like they're wanting us to deal with the severance and then need to know how their feelings are of doing that. Other than that, you know, recommend that we deny it, so I'm just wondering where they stand on that.
Through the chair to Councilor Johnson, they have not indicated either way whether they would like to pursue another. They've been given this information and had this information for a period of time. They elected to move forward with their severance application without indicating their agreement to upgrade the road and or bring. I mean, they should have and could have brought forward an official plan amendment, and they did not. It is, if you read through the correspondence. They contest, their legal counsel contests that it is, or they believe it is a township road. Our legal counsel disagrees that with that, and we have never adopted this road by bylaw and do not provide services, regular maintenance or winter maintenance on this road itself.
Saying that, if it was passed with a holding on it, that it would be granted till they brought it up to a standard. Can that be done like that?
Through the council, through the mayor, Councilor Johnson, absolutely. I think it's laid out. Certainly, if you read the municipal appraisal form, they set out a series of conditions, including placing a holding or an H on the lot, along with a series of other conditions that if council has the desire to support this severance, that we would pass on to the county as conditions that we would accept, and it involves upgrading the road.
For the public, could I get you to read those other conditions, please?
Mayor, Councilor Johnson, absolutely happy to. So we say in the report, should the application be approved, staff recommend the following condition: that Demers Road be improved at the owner's expense in accordance with township policy number 18 and the Township of Douro-Dummer minimum standards for municipal roads and the OBC requirements for fire access route design. To allow the owner an opportunity to achieve this condition within the 2 years of expiry of the decision, of rezoning of the separate parcels will be required, including the use of a holding provision H as outlined in section 3.15 of the zoning bylaw. The holding H symbol shall only be removed once the following applicable requirements have been complied with. All financial requirements have been completed to the satisfaction of the municipality. Approval of required servicing and access has been granted. The phasing and design of the proposed development is acceptable to the municipality. Any identified development constraints can be addressed to the satisfaction of the township. Any site plan control or other requirements have been executed, and that the municipality has given notice pursuant to the requirements of section 36 of the Planning Act of its intention to pass a bylaw and remove the H of the holdings.
All right, I'm willing to make to pass this, and if there's any other comments on here first, but I'll make a motion.
Any other questions from council on the report before we entertain a motion? Councilor Watt.
Thank you, through Madam Mayor. So what I hear, we have they have two options. They can bring the road up to standards, or they can apply for zoning to bring it up to the deficiencies that the road isn't on, correct?
Through the mayor, Councilor White, your two options, the two sort of basic options related to the frontage on the road would either be to A, bring it up to standard, or file an official plan amendment, which would recognize a deficiency in the policy that the road is not up to standard, but we would permit it in that form or fashion. Or if we want to support this, then as Councillor Johnson says, we would support it with a series of conditions that I provided to you just now verbally, which are also contained.
All right, thank you very much. So I guess in my mind, number one, do we want to assume that role? That would be something the roads department would have to, look at, engage and so on. But to actually bring it up, and it could be very tricky. I've been in that road many times trying to get a turnaround if you only go to their property. My best case scenario in my mind right now would be the other option is for them to go the way it is, look after themselves like they always have, but do the amendment to the zoning. But that's my feeling on it. Thank you.
Any other questions from council or staff? Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Just to comment to that, my concern is, back a number of years ago, when I was at the helm of the road department, this come forward about all the trees that was in there, and council made some decisions based on that, and we weren't going to do nothing up to it, and then we did do something. But anyways, keeping that in mind, if it goes back to them, it is our property, and them trees are our trees. That was legal opinion at the time, and so there's probably still a lot of work to be done when it comes to the trees and the reliability that are there. So if we increase the traffic on that road, we are in fact taking on more liability, that it should be brought up to a standard in the first place, in my opinion, brought up to a standard, a township standard, not only for them, but the more people we get in there, then we have fire access, we have all the ambulance access, all the emergency vehicles that need to get into this road, and it's not up to a standard and not plowed to a township standard, which I have a grave concern over allowing that to happen. So my thoughts would be that this should be brought up to a standard before the severances are ever allowed. I'm not in disagreement of the severances, but I believe that it needs to be brought up to the standard that we know that people are safe that live in there, and that it can be accessed either by the emergency services is the big thing. So that's my concern.
Mr. Davis.
Comment to all of council. I think, if the question is this is not a municipally assumed and maintained road at this particular time. We haven't had a delegate, as far as I can tell, certainly during my tenure, which is, I know, relatively short. But also through my research, I do not see evidence that a group has come forward and asked the municipality to take on this road by bylaw, at least not in the near past. If the residents of Demers Road want the municipality or the township, to assume this road into the municipal road infrastructure, there's a process for that. It typically starts, and if we've gone through, I say that to say that we have gone through this process in my short tenure here. We've had somebody else interested in opening a closed road allowance and taking on that responsibility of bringing that road up to township standards. That has not been the case with this. If the residents who live along that lane or private road want that to be brought into the township road system, then there's a process. They should make a delegation to, I would encourage them to make a delegation to council to ask, and then that would trigger a return to staff for us to look into that, to bring forward all of those things. So the deputy mayor is very right. There are lots of different concerns and challenges related to bringing that road up to standard. We do not know exactly, and I wouldn't feel comfortable tonight saying exactly what those are. I would like the opportunity, if that is the will of council based on the feedback from the public, which we haven't had yet, then I would ask for that to be referred to us, for us to bring forward a report as to what it might cost to bring it to standard. I think it would be relatively expensive, and what the ongoing maintenance cost would be, and whether there's taxes that can justify.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, to the chair. Isn't that one of the conditions that's on there, that they bring the road up to standard, right up to their second severance? Isn't that one of the conditions?
Through council to Councilor Johnson, yeah, absolutely, that could be a condition that we put onto this particular severance, but I'm just responding to the comments of Councilor Watt in response by Deputy Mayor Nelson that we may look at the entirety of the road. There are other residences on those roads, and that is one of the concerns, is that they would want their property brought to standard as well, and so certainly the condition, we can make a condition that the individual property owner is responsible to bring that road up to our standard, should they desire for the severance. That would be a condition related to that.
Any other questions of staff? So, okay, Councillor Watt, and then we'll go to Councillor Johnson for your motion.
Sorry, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So do they have an either or, like they could leave the road the way it is and do the rezoning, or they could bring it up to road standard, or is that in our hands to say this is what you're doing?
Through the mayor, Councilor Watt. So I think the reality is, I think when you consider what you want to do with your property, I think the policy, we have a policy that states, that's in our official plan, that says we will not support or permit the law creation on a roadway that isn't a public roadway or isn't assumed and maintained by the township. So an official plan amendment would be site specific to that property, recognizing that the road is not up to municipal standard. We still wouldn't support, to be quite honest with you, if they applied for an official plan amendment, I can't imagine that the township could support that application, that planning application as it stood, because if we allowed for frontage on the road without it being brought to a standard, as the deputy mayor has pointed out, and I look down the line at the manager of public works and the fire chief, we have to be able to confidently get emergency vehicles in. We have to confidently be able to get access to that property, and that would be a significant concern for us based on the quality and standard of that roadway today, which is why we would support an official plan amendment. It is an option for them. I'm not suggesting that it would be successful. I'm not sure how. The other thing I would remind you is that we do not make official plan amendment decisions at this table. That is made through Peterborough County, through our upper tier government, and so I can't tell you exactly how that body would vote or decide on that.
Okay, Councillor Johnston, you have a motion you wanted to make.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to defer this and send it back to our staff to maybe talk to the applicant about bringing the road up to a standard to release to their property, to pass the seventies.
Anyone want to second that motion?
Second that motion.
Deputy Mayor Nelson? Any discussion on the motion? I'll just add before I call the vote then that, I mean, I think it seems that in reading the report, there's been lots of dialogue between staff and the proponents pertaining to bringing the road up to a standard, and the proponents have been given the opportunity and they understand what the policy is for bringing a road up, and it's the same policy that we've used historically, and have people who are in the midst going through that process even at present moment. So I don't understand personally why they would want to move forward with a severance application without knowing that they have a road that can service those lots. And to me, although severance is great, thinking about the number of fire lanes and fire routes that we have in the township that are not owned by the township or maintained by the township, I couldn't imagine just putting in lots where there isn't road access to them for people to get to those properly. Notwithstanding island properties, it's a different case. So, when we start thinking about the longer term impacts of this, are we going to start putting, lots on a back 40 that have no, or a camp a high camp or something that doesn't have any access for people, like, where does this go? So I'm confused by the way that the applicant has gone forward with this. But by the same token, I'm not against further dialogue, so I would support the motion that's on the floor, but with caution. Because I don't know how far this is going to go, you know, and as the applicants are concerned, it's just tying up their resources, I think, more so, as well as staff resources to continue conversations when we can't get people to blocks that they want to sever. So with that, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. Okay, on to item 10.3, the severance application, B-118-24. Eddie, of course, we had a request come through during the public comment period, but we'll hand it over to our CAO once again to present the report.
Sure, thank you. From the mayor, through the mayor to members of council, I recognize that Mr. Corey has requested a deferral on this matter. If before we get too deep into this report, I support the request for deferral. I think there's more to discuss. There could be more to discuss. If council, the will of council is for me to present this report, a decision to be made tonight, then absolutely happy to do that. But if you'd like to defer, then I'm happy to see that.
Okay, Councillor Watt has his hand up. Councillor Johnson has his mic open. We'll go with Councillor Johnson. He's quick on the button.
Oh, well, I'll let Councilor Watt speak on it, but I'm gonna make a motion to defer it. But it was
Okay, great. You're voting.
I'll make a motion to
Great, we've got a first and a second. Any discussion on that? All in favor? And that motion carries. That one was easy. On to item 10.4, amendment to site plan control bylaw, housekeeping update, and again, over to CAO Davis.
So the mayor and members of council, this is my final report of the night. My final report that I didn't author, I also. So this report was authored by the retired planner, Christy Coulter. It requires its proposed amendments to the site plan control bylaw. I think the report is pretty straightforward. It generally speaks for itself. What I will point out is that all of the housekeeping amendments that we are proposing are as a result of or a reflection of the various pieces of provincial legislation that have come before us from 2022 to 2024, whether it's the Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act, Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act, Bill 97, the Helping Homebuyers Protecting Tenants Act, Bill 185, Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act. What I will suggest, and we retain the services of DM Wills to complete a jurisdictional scan and provide or present the particular updates to this, to the site plan control bylaw. The one discretionary change that we made as staff to those recommendations, they recommend that the planner be empowered to sign the site plan control bylaw. I recognize that that is typically done in a jurisdiction where you have a member of your planning staff who is a registered provincial planner or an RPP or an MCIP by trade. I would note that we do not have that individual on staff currently, and we may not have that individual on staff. And as usually as a fallback, and traditionally how this works is we empower the CAO and or their designate and the CBO to sign the set plans. And so that is what we are recommending tonight. The rest of the recommendations as proposed by DM Wills and as a reflection of the various pieces of legislation, we are very supportive of, but happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions of staff on the report? Seeing nothing, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to follow the recommendation.
Okay. Anyone second that? Councillor Johnston, any discussion to the motion? All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. Okay, on to item 10.5, the 2025 budget with additional information and board deliberation, and that is over to our treasurer, Mr. Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening and welcome to the 2025 budget deliberation meeting. If I can request the clerk to throw some slides up on the screen. So we're going to kind of tackle this section of the meeting through 4 different items. I have a few slides here that I'm going to review and provide a summary of. They will summarize where the budget currently sits, how we got here, and identify the decisions that have been identified to be deliberated at tonight's meeting. And we can also use, there's a summary that will come up that we can use as a bit of a guide for council. Then there's 3 staff reports. The first one is authored by me that I'll provide a summary of. Provides a variety of information that has been requested throughout the process from council. The next 2 reports are regarding staffing requests, from the first one from our clerk and the second from our fire chief. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. And this slide is just to remind everyone in the room and listening how we got to where we are today. So we provided and released the draft budget right before the holidays. And then managers and staff presented the first draft over 2 separate meetings, January 7th and January 9th. Council had the opportunity to ask questions. The budget was presented in detail and in depth at those meetings. We then held a budget working session with council on the 23rd. Council got an opportunity to ask some questions and just make sure they have an understanding of everything included in the budget. On February 4th, we held a public meeting here and presented where the budget stood at that time. There was an opportunity for the public, obviously at a public meeting, to make comment, and we did not receive. We had a few questions the night of that council received that night. And that brings us to today. So throughout the process, there have been some motions made by council, and you'll see them in a few slides. Council will deliberate those, and we hope that council can make some decisions and provide direction on the budget, and provide the direction necessary to bring us to our next meeting and lead us to budget passage. And that's kind of my note there, that from here, I will kind of take any direction provided from council and finalize the budget document for budget passage on March 4th. Next slide. So this slide summarizes numerically where we're sitting. Currently, we have a 4% change to the tax rate, which represents per 100,000 assessment, $1.52 per month, for $18.27 annually. For our median property of $256,000, that would be $3.90 per month, or $46.78 annually. Just a reminder that $256,000 is based on 2016 assessment. It may not be reflective of current values, as MPAC has not yet done a reassessment since 2016. There have been some changes made since the first draft that was presented. These were made through consensus at the budget working session and then passed at the last council meeting. So there were a few items that were recommended by there were a few items recommended by staff that were not included in the proposed budget in order to meet the inflationary target that staff had heading into this process. One of those items that were not included was a pickup truck replacement for the fire department. Council made through consensus the decision to add that into the budget at $65,000. Staff did include a shelter at Antonia Park. Council made the decision to remove that project from the budget at this time. heading into the budget at a previous meeting, staff were directed to include a donation to the Morton Medical Center for deliberation. It was made through consensus to remove that donation. There were 3 separate surface treatment projects that staff had recommended, and at the working session, council made the decision to not include those projects in the 2025 budget. So after those, we started at 3.3%, and we are currently sitting at 4%. Move on to the next slide. So these are the items. There were a number of motions made. So the first motion that was made at the working session was to remove the roads pickup truck from the budget at an amount of $55,000, to remove the elevator repair at the municipal office for $22,000, and to reduce the township tree program from $10,000 to $5,000, for resulting of $5,000 reduction from the budget. There were some projects that were recommended, and there were motions to include 2 of those projects. The first one being the facilities maintenance plan, and the second one being a bylaw review. At the working session, there was a motion for a project that had not been included at that time, and that is to replace the microphones in the council chambers. There are 2 remaining operating requests that require direction from council, and these are the requests that there are additional reports on tonight's agenda. The first one being the request for a corporate admin assistant, and the second for a full-time deputy fire chief. So from there, I think we can turn off the presentation. We'll come back to it when we get to council consideration and deliberation. We can open up for any questions at this time before I go into the rest of the reports.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. You saw I was like, no, I have questions. First, before I ask questions, any questions from council, Mr. Kramer, at this point in time? Mr. Johnson?
Through the chair, I just want to make one note. With the building at in Dawnwood, we put that on hold, but I must want to say that we are providing picnic tables to the spot that the people can sit on. So I was wondering, no, that's never been said. So we're not just wiping it out totally, we are including tables there. That's big, that.
Thank you for noting that. Any questions of Mr. Kramer based on what he's presented so far? So I just have a question, because there's a bit of a, I would say, discrepancy in the report. I'm sure I'm reading it incorrectly. So in your staff report, 25-03, that's on the agenda, this report that you're speaking to, you reference that the microphone, the facility maintenance plan, and the records retention project is being recommended that if council decides to move forward with that, that it's funded through the modernization funding, the balance is remaining. So on this slide here, when it's showing items voted by council, it's showing a tax impact, for example, the facilities maintenance plan at 0.4%. So if it's funded through the modernization funding, should that not be 0 and then ultimately change the bottom line, or is that kind of still where you're working with, Mr. Chairman?
Madam Mayor. So because of it's had a little bit of challenge in presenting this just because there's a layered set of recommendations here. So the first set of recommendations is to complete the project as it was presented and as the motion was made at the working session, or first draft and at the working session, it was to be funded by the levy. I have a subsequent report, and that's why I was saying I was going to tackle this in pieces. My next report does have some recommendations that, based on where we are sitting with our modernization funding, that we have an opportunity to fund some of these items through the modernization fund. So if council were to make that subsequent approval to that recommendation, then yes, those items would not have an impact to the levy.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I recognize that it is, like, there's a few different reports in play on this, so I just wanted to make sure, like, which one was most true given the circumstances. So thank you for that clarity. Any other questions of council before Mr. Kramer moves on? Floor is yours, sir.
So in my, through you, Madam Mayor, my report, Treasurer 2025-03, there are 3 separate items that are discussed. The first being the status of modernization funding, and that's what you were alluding to. So I provided a table that shows what we have completed, which projects are ongoing, the amounts, the budget and the amount spent on each project. And so previously to this report, we did have 575,000 of the 591,000 allocated to projects. There have been a number of projects that we've been able to complete under budget, and so there is a let me just get my numbers straight. So there's 56,000 unallocated to that can be allocated to other projects. In addition to the original 16,000 that was not allocated. So for a total of 66,000. So we looked at the projects that have been recommended and are available to fund in this budget. The first one being the facility maintenance plan for 25,000. The second one being the microphone upgrades of 7,500. And also in this project, we have a records retention project that is going to be a 3-year project, which was partially funded through the modernization funding. And we are recommending to fund the rest of that project through the modernization, and that is to minimize future tax impacts. I believe that these projects do align with the intent and purpose and how we leverage this grant for the rest of the funds. So I actually just want to comment that I think this has been a really successful grant from the province. It was a large sum of money that we received, but we've been able to achieve a lot through the organization from a modernization perspective using these funds. And we hope to continue to leverage the remaining to do the same. The second piece, this was requested from Councillor Report. It was not in attendance, but I think it's still helpful information for the rest of council, is a property tax comparison. What we do see, and this is always a difficult thing to put onto paper in the sense of it's very difficult to compare apples to apples based on the services that each township provides, the level of service. However, it is helpful. I mean, what I did in this analysis is used the median household in each township. That's not to say that it's the same house in each township, but it is the median house. And so the chart on my report on page 3 does show that for the lower tier taxes on the median household, Douro-Dummer pays $1,100, and that puts us kind of fourth highest or lowest, yeah, 4th highest out of the 6. So if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer. The last piece in my report is just a discussion and some commentary on the municipal office elevator restoration modernization project. There were questions around where some of the numbers came from. This is based on a previous estimate that we received that was for 12,000. I think as staff internally, we recognized that this was going to be, the estimate was a couple of years old, and we provided for a contingency. The recommendation from council or from staff on this is that we would get a updated estimate and a firm scope of work before we proceed. We would provide council with an opportunity to review that scope of work before we proceed and complete the project. And that's open up for any questions on my section of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Creamer. Questions?
Through the
Councilor
chair,
Johnson?
saying that, then you're putting, you're suggesting that we put in the budget $22,000 for the elevator, is that right? Can you say that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Johnson, yes, that's correct.
Any other questions of Mr. Creamer on this? So procedurally, folks, just looking at our clerk and treasurer, how do you want us to go forward with this? Do you want us to start looking at your recommendations in your report at this moment in time? And discussing that, or are we waiting to hear from the chief and our clerk on the other two reports that are with this? How do you want us to navigate this?
My recommendation, Madam Mayor, would be to receive the information from the clerk and the fire chief, and then go back to my slide and maybe just go line by line, and we can note where there were recommendations to add the modernization funding. The one item that won't be addressed through that would be the records retention project. So we can address that at that time though, and we'll come back to it.
Okay. Council, we're okay with that as a way forward on that? Thank you. Okay, so then with that, we won't take any motions. We will hand it over to, I think it was the chief that was next. Was that a next report? The chief? Where do I start?
Okay, I hope the report demonstrates that a shared position with corporate services has a host of challenges and probably wouldn't work very well for these two positions. For more than 15 years, council has supported a volunteer deputy chief with the ability to work up to 20 hours per week. Historically, over that 15+ years, these hours have not been fulfilled on a consistent basis due to the flexibility of a volunteer position. During the same time period, we've had a significant increase in workload and anticipate more demands with the completion of our recently legislated community risk assessment and a master fire plan that outlines the goals for the next 6+ years. As far as the budget is concerned, I want to paint a picture for areas that may not be as clear as they should be due to similar challenges as our treasurer discussed earlier tonight. The full-time deputy position was in the recommended but optional section of the budget. So the current wages in the budget for firefighting are based on the historical averages over several budget years plus inflationary costs. And this includes the deputy wages and honorarium as a volunteer position. We know that if we have a volunteer deputy that worked 20 hours every week plus their honorarium, we would have an impact on the budget of around $30,000. But historically, we paid out only $15,000, and that's what our current budget is based on. So when you look at the numbers provided in the financial impact section of the report, you can reduce those numbers by $15,000 if any of those options are selected. I'd also like to take the opportunity to explain the notes under the financial impact chart. As you're probably aware, the township uses a human resources company for certain tasks for township employees. Recently, we had discussions with them about what they could offer for our volunteer firefighters. A proposal was provided to offer services at a cost of $25 per firefighter per month. So based on our roster, this would be around the $20,000 mark as shown in the chart. This was added to the part-time deputy position option due to the limited hours versus a full-time position. As this is a contract will free up some administrative time for us to help bridge this gap from part-time to full-time if that is chosen. So to provide an example of all this, let's look at the part-time deputy position. The low end rate is shown in the chart as $71,058. Then we take off the $15,000 that we currently have in our budget. So that would be a $56,058 budget impact for wages. And if we add in the HR company support, we would be adding $20,000 for contracted services. Lastly, the council desired to make this position a prorated position that could also be considered, but council must understand that this will have an impact on next year's budget for the full amount. So if we continue with the part-time position example and it had a start date of July 1st, the impact would approximately be $28,000 to wages and $10,000 for the contract services. So I hope that kind of fills in some of the blanks in the report, because we are looking at this as what we're proposing, and then the option of this position. So the recommendation is that the Fire Chief 2025-02 report dated February 18th regarding the Deputy Fire Chief position be received, and that council direct staff to select one of the options shown in the financial impact chart to be included in the 2025 budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions I may have not covered.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Any questions from the council? Council Ward.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Chuck, what does adding the firefighters and part-time ones to the human resources contract, what does that do for us? I'm not quite sure, sorry.
I'm sure through the mayor, Councilor Watt. So we have a preliminary proposal given to us, and it talks of it. We haven't really got into negotiations. If we can maybe lower that, but it talks about onboarding our volunteers. So we're doing interviews, reference checks, all the phone calls you have to make for that. They can store our operating guidelines and policies on their servers, so that they'll be accessed by any firefighters through that, which is a better system. What we have now is a paper copy. There's training involved with some of the other stuff that we have with the WMS and AODA, the workplace and harassment policies. They manage all that. You can take that online, so we're not taking hours away from our regular training night to try to fit those things in. And we spent a lot of time pursuing people to get things accomplished. So this company would take care of those things, and we wouldn't have to do that. If there's any HR support that we needed, they would provide that as well. They would write any letters that we may need to do, any separation agreements, or there's exit interviewing that's done. This is in here. Yeah, there's some training records, but we have those things that we have to sort out, because we also have our own training records. So whether that could be something that they'll either import or export to our software, or something that we eliminate. So we may be able to reduce that number, but we haven't got into the details of that worst case scenario right now. If that makes sense. Answer the question.
Mr. Davis.
To the chair, the members of council, I just want to sort of support Chuck's comments related to this sort of protocol or process. The reality is, a lot of these sort of tasks are tasked to the chief to keep records of and maintain, and that deviates, or that takes him away from doing all the other things that we require him to do. If we want to move forward with the fire services master plan that you approved in the late summer, we need to find a way. We need to find a way to get the chief some time to be able to do that kind of work for us. And in order to do that, some of the mundane HR tasks that we are constantly tasked with, and some of the resources that we expend on them, this sort of brings them to a central location in the same way that we manage the rest of our staff. So we just wanted to recognize that we use these systems in an effort to onboard our current complement of full-time and part-time staff, as well as maintain our training records that are necessary for legislative training, and that's what this would offer.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Chief, sir. I was going to look that way. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chuck, for the report and everything. Just a question further to that. If there was a full-time deputy chief, he would be looking after some of these tasks. Is that correct? He would be actually looking after a lot of this and giving you help in that regard, compared to it being an outside firm. So is that correct?
Yeah, through the mayor to the mayor. Yeah, so if we're just trying to bridge a gap, because I think we've demonstrated by going through this that there's certainly a need for the hours. But I recognize that council asked us to bring back alternate options in a full-time position. So trying to bridge that gap and find time, the hours just don't create themselves. This is a solution that would help bridge that gap. You know, obviously, you know, if we had, there's myself, and if we had a full-time deputy and our administrative assistant, you know, we would divvy up what we need to do, and we could do that without them. Saying that, they're much better at this particular task than any of us would be. So there is some benefit there in, you know, focusing on a specialized area. But yeah, that would be, the request isn't there with a full-time position because we're just trying to somehow make up those hours.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? So I'll follow up with one, just clarify, please, Chief, the numbers for me, when you were talking about the current volunteer DC deputy chief who is getting paid an honorarium plus the hourly rate. You had mentioned something about right now that individual is the actual costs of about $15,000 a year, but you had initially noted in your notes $30,000. So have we been historically budgeting for 30 and then those actuals only come in at 15?
No. So we don't, we've been budgeting anticipated what we've been paying you. So we take all we don't look at just the volunteer deputy, we look at all the firefighters and captains and district chiefs and the deputy, and we look at that number and say, this is the number that we spend on wages for training and response. And then we look at that and say, okay, here's our anticipated inflationary numbers, both for wages and for anticipated call volume. And then whatever training that we have planned. So we take everything in, it's kind of one big pot. We're not looking at the deputy as an individual. So although that's there as a support, we've only really been, based on history, we've only really been paying out about half of what we could, but we're budgeting for what we have actually paid, not for what we could pay it, if that answers your question.
It does, but it raises more, so please bear with me. So I'm trying to get an understanding of, you know, what we have now for resources. And I know you're having a hard time getting an understanding because our current DC hadn't been charging for those additional hours. But we're calling on, in your report, we're calling a part-time position at 28 hours a week. So to compare apples to apples, like, are we going to, if we say at a minimum as council approve a part-time DC role, I'm thinking, like, is it really going to create any more bandwidth based on the current number of hours the DC is spending? And do we need to backfill that role? So it is a creation, truly is a creation of a new position versus just properly recognizing an existing position.
Right, and I understand, yeah, no, I understand that, and that has definitely, I figured this question would come up. So I guess the biggest thing is that currently we're blessed with a great deputy. He offers more than he charges us. But saying that, like, if we look at, I don't know what tomorrow may hold, and, you know, people have different, as a volunteer position, there's different impacts that come into their life, and whether they can continue to give that level of commitment or not, that changes. So if nothing else, if the part-time position is there, it's establishing a fixed 28 hours that we can depend on. It's not bridging it to a 40-hour work week, but it's consistent that we have a little bit more control over than a volunteer position that we say work up to 20 hours. So I think there is value in it because of the consistency that we will get out of it. My recommendation is still if I had my choice, I would still follow my recommendation that original is saying that we need a full-time position because of the amount of work. But just trying to provide options that are provided, but I do think understanding that there may be 20 hours provided now, and yes, we're only getting another 8, but that's still another day, and it's still consistent work versus variable work that can sometimes impact the volunteer position.
Sure. I understand the structure is very different, going from volunteer to a fixed position. So then again, just looking at your table, looking at the part-time role, and I'm just going to throw the low numbers out because You know, that role would be at a cost of $71,000. And then on top of that, you would also still be requesting an additional 20,000 to take advantage, or not take advantage, but to put the current roster of volunteer firefighters with our human resources partner, who already provides those services, to free up additional bandwidth. So we'd be looking at a total cost of that part-time role of about 91,000 for 28 hours a week versus a contract 40-hour week at 93,000. Is that, and they would then take, that role would then assume that $20,000 HR expense, because they would have the capacity to be able to manage that.
That's correct. The only slight adjustment which affects both is minus 15,000 off whatever you choose.
Correct.
Yeah.
About that. Okay, thank you for creating that clarity. Any other questions from council? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, through the mayor. Chuck, thanks, again, just a question I have is, even though we have a part-time deputy chief now, doesn't mean that he's gonna stay around or is obligated to stay around. But how easy is it to get somebody with them qualifications for a part-time job? I would assume that it's probably very hard to get a part-time person with them qualifications to want to work part-time. If they want, they're probably looking for a full-time position with them qualifications. Would that be correct? Or?
So through the mayor to the deputy, yeah, it's definitely, with the world of certification, it's definitely a lot more tricky to get the required amount of certifications and training that position needs. So it is a challenge. It's more of a challenge. But I will say that there's 2 in Peterborough County that have part-time deputies. They're both 2-hatters. So they have full-time firefighting as their primary career. So they get some of those qualifications. So is it impossible? No, it's being demonstrated here in 2 other municipalities in Peterborough County. It's not as easy. You may not, it's always easier to fill a full-time position in today's world, but it's not impossible, and it has been demonstrated that way. Yeah. And currently, I know that our deputy is interested in whatever needs that we may offer.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Seeing nothing else, we will now look at the clerk's report. I think we'll do it all at the same time. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to just skip over the first part of my report because our fire chief already spoke to it, which was the combination or trying to combine these positions, which we didn't see as a tenable solution. So as laid out in the budget presentation from January 9th, the clerk's department is requesting that a corporate services assistant be added to the staff complement to provide us with the capacity we need to meet the service levels that council has set for the township. The township undertook a service delivery review and organizational review in 2020. In the review, there were recommendations regarding the staffing of the clerk's department, calling for a refocus of the roles of the clerk and deputy clerk, focusing on statutory duties. As the township worked through the recommendations from the service delivery group, there were staffing changes which impacted the clerk's department. The first was the decision to leave the deputy clerk position vacant and to introduce the position of the township planner. The second was a shift of the senior administrative assistant role being part of the clerk's department to being removed, so it splits its time supporting public works, parks and rec, and the CAO. These changes have reduced the department from a team of 4 in 2020 to a team of 2.5 going into 2025. The team currently comprises of the clerk, the legislative services assistant, and the receptionist, who splits their time between frontline customer service and finance tasks. To gain some capacity in the department, staff have actively sought out opportunities to utilize interns and summer students to assist with projects and tasks. As mentioned in the presentation on January 9th and in various committee of the whole reports, while helpful, these short-term positions cannot be expected to complete as much work expected to complete much of the work, which is done by the clerk's department. These opportunities are great to assist with one-off special projects, such as reviewing a policy or a document. Further to that, these positions necessitate a high degree of supervision and direction to achieve those results, making them inefficient for long-term work students. To complete the current required work of the department, the goal set by council and to meet the requirement of over 65 pieces of provincial legislation which call on or direct the clerk to be responsive or responsible, the department requires additional staffing to meet our obligations. Below, in my report, I have laid out various alternatives to the full-time position as requested by council at the working session. It is staff's recommendation that the full-time position will result in the greatest increase in capacity for the department, while also reducing staff turnover, which is seen in many contract positions the township has put forward. When those contract positions turn over, we not only have the staff time and cost of recruitment cycles, but we also have the cost of training and the loss of institutional knowledge. Should a contract option be chosen by council, the recommendation is that the contract runs until the end of Q1 2028, which will cover the length of the township's current strategic plan. Happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Any questions of the clerk on her report? Councillor Johnson, you look like you're about ready.
Well, yeah, I just on the contract, as one, we would have to go to the public to get a person, to work on the contract, for a contractor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Johnson, I imagine for a contract position, we would go out in the seat. What's available?
Any other questions of staff on the report that's before us right now? Okay, seeing nothing. And back over to Mr. Bremer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we'll bring the presentation and the slides back up, and I think that will guide council's discussion. So item 1 on this list, this was a motion made at the working session, and these are items that so this is included currently, and it would need a motion to, or the motion would need to be passed to remove this project. So the motion made by council was to remove the road pickup truck number 24 in the amount of $55,000. If there's any questions or discussion, we have our Director of Public Works here, or manager.
Okay, council. So before us, we have there was a motion or a discussion rather in our workshop or working group to remove this item. What would you like to do with this? We need a formal motion to either keep it in or pull it out.
I'll make a motion to actually keep it in after listening to our manager's comments on the truck. And possibly we might get a reduction if we put the two trucks together in, or if we're looking for two trucks, to the fire truck and the public works truck, we might get a reduction in the cost of that vehicle. So I think we're just kicking the can down the road by not getting the truck, and it sounded to me like there was a lot of, or it could be very costly amount of repairs to be done to this truck just to keep it in service for 1 year. If I look at it being 0.8% of the budget, that's a pretty small amount in comparison to repairs.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to keep it in the budget. Does anyone want to second that motion? Councillor Watt? Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Watt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and as Deputy Mayor Nelson said, our manager of Public Works has expressed that the current truck that they use is getting pretty dilapidated. If we're gonna get rid of it, now's the time to get the best deal on it. And it is a truck that gets used a lot. It's not just a frivolous, you know, somebody needs one to do this, that, whatever. It's pretty well a daily use truck as far as I understand. One that does a lot of work. So to keep up with the demand of the public, what we need, I think we need to keep this in.
Okay, so we've got a motion, a second, any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? And that motion carries. On to the elevator. Okay, you heard earlier, Council, Mr. Kramer talk about the elevator. What would you like to do with this? Are you only keeping that in, or maybe Councilor Watt?
Let's see, Madam Mayor. Couple of questions on it, on something else here too, like that's related, but the modernization funding, which we have an option of how we want to go on that. So I wasn't sure whether some of that money could go towards the elevator. And I look at that elevator as accessibility is really pushed down our throats for the last how many years. Looking at coming in here tonight down that ramp, I wouldn't want somebody with a disability trying to come down that slippery slope there tonight. And I know it's not like that usually, but you get weather conditions like this. It's like that elevator would be very, very needed. Not only for the general public, but even for the workers upstairs that have to bring files and boxes and everything from upstairs. They have to take them down the sidewalk, down the ramp, down in the air, and then back up. I fully think that we should leave this money in the budget, get a final on it, but I'd also like to know if it is double that money, where would we get the extra funding to fix it? But I do definitely think it needs to be fixed.
Okay, Councilor Watt, so I heard a question or two in there as well in terms of whether or not the money from the modernization funding, and also where the additional money would be coming from if it does cost more than what's budgeted for. Mr. Kramer, do you want to address this?
To you, Madam Mayor, to Councilor Watt. It would be up to council's discretion to allocate modernization funding to this project. We could amend the recommendations in front of you, whether that's for facilities maintenance plan or the records retention project going forward, to fund the records retention project from future years, but we would just ask for a motion to do as such. We will, like I mentioned, we will report back on the ultimate cost and with a more detailed estimate and work plan on the elevator. Any overage, we would have to evaluate at that time, whether it comes from a reserve or potentially there's other under project savings along the way before we get to that point. We would just be reporting back. Potential would be reserves or other savings that we have done.
Okay, Mr. Kramer, just to clarify then, should council choose to move forward with it, the modernization funding, would this be considered an eligible expense? I was unclear in your answer there.
The requirements of that grant were pretty loose. So in my opinion, it would. I think a lot of the projects that we have completed to date were more around enhancements and not necessarily ongoing maintenance and repair of our existing. I think if we go through the signs, for the projects, it's been a lot more of system and software technology related items. But that doesn't mean this project would not be able to be funded from that.
Okay, thank you for that further clarification. So Councilor Watt, coming back to you, were you making a motion then, or?
I would just make a motion to leave the $22,000 in and staff to come back with a final report on what the cost actually will be for it, and then we can decide after that where the money would come from to repair.
Okay, anyone want to second one?
I'll second that.
Any discussion to motion, Councilor Johnson?
To the chair, I would like to see that $22,000 drop down to $10,000. And then take it up where we come up with it later with the modernization or whatever. But I'd like to see that cut in half instead of being $22,000 up front.
Okay, Councillor Johnson, so we already have a motion that's on the floor, so if that
I'm
motion,
speaking against it.
I understand. And if it's that, depending on how that motion goes, you can make that other motion as a follow-up, I'll make note of that. Any other discussion on the motion? I'll
I
just,
think I see no one to say a few words or something.
so,
No, I did not, I didn't realize.
okay, you're fine, okay, I'll speak to the motion. I think having an elevator in the building is incredibly important. I echo much of Councillor Watt's sentiment. I'm concerned in my mind, my uneducated mind when it comes to elevators, that these are very expensive things to own and maintain, which is why many people don't put them in. I am very skeptical that the amount will be $22,000. I think it will be significantly higher, even if we, entertain Councillor Johnston's motion. I think we're going to be well over $22,000. However, I'm comfortable with proceeding with keeping the funds in the budget, providing that not a penny is spent until we have absolute clarity on what it's going to take to upgrade the elevator, because I don't want to get in $2,000 deep, $5,000 deep, $10,000 deep, and then finding out it's going to be another $50,000 or $25,000 on top of that. So to the motion that's on the floor, providing, as you said, staff report back, and we have clear direction on what a fix looks like and the costs, then I would support that as it sits. So with that, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. On to item reducing the township tree program. So it was $10,000, reducing it down to $5,000. Council, what would you like to do with that? Councilor Johnson.
I make, through the chair, I would still make the motion that we reduce it down to 5,000. I know it was a very good program and a lot of people participated in it, but I think we've done our share from that storm no, I don't think we need to put $10,000. I'd rather see it for 5,000. So we're fine, we'll go ahead, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
I will take that motion.
Yeah, that we
Yeah.
only provide 5,000.
Okay, anyone want to second that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Deputy Mayor Nelson. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Watt.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I don't have a problem, but I do have a question on how the program works. So if we put in 5,000, people are just buying that $5,000 worth of trees from us, or can we get 10,000 if we have that much, but it's 5,000 out of the public's money? I'm not quite sure how this works, whether we just buy X number of trees and then they're sold, or whether, like I say, whether taxpayers' money, like the public's money goes in, and we may end up getting 10 or 15,000 worth of the trees, but only 5 is from us.
Which of you two would like to take that, Mr. Graham?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Watt. Our approach is this program, the funds provided for this program subsidize the cost of the trees. And so, we don't make a profit. So if we buy $10,000 worth of trees, we use the 5,000 to offset the cost and be able to provide the trees at a discount to the public.
I do have a question, but also a comment related to it. I'm okay with reducing the budget from $10,000 to $5,000. I know historically we have allowed people, even members of this council, who have ordered trees and capped that at 5 per property in the township. What I am curious as a question is, can we, because I know we sell out every year, the years that we've done it. And I know, because I've been there to hand deliver trees to people and put them in their cars for them when they come to pick them up. I know that we've had people repeatedly purchase, like year after year, the same people purchase trees. Is there a way, I know as the clerk, because I know that administratively it's kind of fallen under you. Is there a way that we can, with a reduced budget, put a line in saying if somebody had received trees previously, they can't order trees again this year, so that a wider audience can access this program? Because it seems it does sell out and it is very first come, first served.
Through you, Madam Mayor. This is council's program, and you can direct it however you wish. We do have the records from the last 2 years because it is our intention to keep them. If you ask next year, I would not have the same information, but today I do. So we could go through the records and see who was purchased and then leave them on like a do not sell list for this year.
And that's where it's going, and of course, it's council's desire, do we have to keep it, do we have that information to be able to? So I don't know if by way of motion or a friendly amendment that we look at supporting the program to $5,000, but opening it up, or rather restricting it to people who had purchased and received trees historically, if the mover and seconder would be willing to change their motion, or I would be accepting the motion forward.
No, I'll make the amendment to that motion.
Okay. And
Agreed.
Deputy Mayor, you'll agree to that? Councilor what?
Quick question, if I may. Thank you very much. So we have the list. Did we have a lot more people at one of them that we just didn't have any left? Is that, I think, that would be a big question in my mind.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last part. You could just repeat.
Okay, so did we have, so let's say we had 100 people wanted trees. Was there 150 asked for them, but we only had enough room for, like, is there another 50 people that want these trees that didn't get them before? Or
Through you, Madam Mayor, we did keep a wait list, so I can't say for certain how many people were waiting for trees.
That's
just
what?
to finish that off, because I don't want us to get $5,000 worth of trees and then find out we've limited to a certain number of people, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we've still got $3,000 worth of trees because there's not that many people that wanted them this time. So I don't want to get caught in that either.
No, and that's a fair point. I know, I'm just going from my gut and speaking with staff as the program has unfolded over the last couple of years, that it has been high enough in demand that it sells out within a couple of weeks of saying, order your trees. We don't have to beg people to order their trees. So I feel confident that, the fact that it sells out. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the amended or the friendly amendment to the motion. We'll call vote. Or did you want to speak on that?
Just one more comment, if I might, Madam Mayor. If the list comes in and there's previous people that have already bought, there's no reason why we couldn't finish out the list at the end of that. Here, I think that's up to let our clerk look after that, and then I'm sure it'll run fine.
That's a fair point. Madam Clerk?
Madam Mayor, what if, just to make the program a little easier to administer, what if we open the list to those who haven't purchased for a certain number of weeks, let's say the first 2-3 weeks of the program, and then once that time is complete, then we open the list to the all the township.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Seeing some balance.
Yeah.
Administratively. I just, the whole point in it is I know there are people who have not been able to get trees who are wanting to get trees. And, people, it becomes like a radio contest, whoever can dial in quickest, hardest, fastest kind of thing. It's the same people year over year, and it's blocking those people who've been trying to get trees, then we should be able to hold space for those people. So I think we understand where we're going with that. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so going down the list, Mr. Kramer, correct me if I'm wrong, we're on the approved facilities maintenance plan for $25,000, but not at the 0.4% levy increase, but looking at the modernization funding to fund that. Is that correct?
To Madam Mayor, that's correct. The staff recommendation at this point would be to approve the project and to use modernization funding. So it'd be up to the council to make a motion as such. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Council, what would you like to do?
I'll make that
Councilor
motion.
Wilson is making that motion. Anyone want to second that motion? Everybody's nodding. Councilor Watt. So with the motion on the floor, any discussion on the motion? All in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. On to the bylaw review project.
for $10,000, and this will impact the levy by 0.1% and not come from modernization funding. Am I correct in saying that, Mr. Kramer? Okay. Council, what would you like to do? Councilor Watt?
I'm gonna make a motion that we keep that in, and the reason being, we do have a lot of bylaws that are very dated. You know, we just had something this past week that, or I heard from, you know, the past week that was like years and years old, kind of like that. It's like, it's time we have a complete overhaul and see what we can bring up to date, what we need to bring up to date, what we should bring up to date. And I know it's a project, but I do really think it's a good project.
Councilor Watt, I believe that this isn't for overall bylaw review, but it's for the specific review of our nuisance bylaws, property standards. So this is before us. I'll speak. I know. It's like I know the answer to this one. I got this one. Yes. So this was added to the budget after the first budget was presented because we had also a request from the building planning department for to set aside funds for a zoning bylaw update, I think is the term, yeah. And we were putting away like several thousands of dollars a year, and we have to begin doing that sooner than later. And then we discovered that we had a little bit more set aside than what we needed. So staff were requesting, instead of setting, I believe, $25,000 aside for that project, that instead we not do that, but only set, you know, do this project instead for, you know, the new low price of $10,000 as opposed to 25, which was originally requested. Do I have that right, Steph? I got that. Kind of. Very close. Very close enough. Or okay. So council, on that item, what would you like to do with it? Oh, we have a motion. Is there a motion even?
Sure, to keep it in. Yeah,
to keep it in. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Yes. So we need a seconder on that motion.
I'll second.
Debbie Graham, Nelson. Any comments on the motion? All in favor? That motion carries. Perfect, thank you. On to the addition of the microphone replacement for the chambers. Again, Mr. Kramer, it's here because it wasn't originally in the budget. And you had it as a 0.1% increase, but now that would be 0 because it too is being recommended to come from modernization funding. What would you like to do with it, council? Deputy Mayor?
I'd like to make that motion that we leave it in.
Okay, and you would like to second that? Councilor Watt, any discussion? Councilor Johnson?
Just a quick question. So therefore, it will not be 0.1, right?
Yeah, it will be 0%.
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion then? All in favor? That motion carries, thank you. So now we are on to the corporate admin assistant role. What would you like to do with that, council? Based on the report. Oh, sorry, didn't hear us.
I'll make a motion that we go on with the recommendation of the report and hire an admin assistant to fulfill the duties as Martina has laid out in her report.
Okay, so the full-time permanent addition? Is
Yes.
that the one just a little clear? Thank you. Does anyone want to second that motion? Councilor Watt? Yeah.
Thank you. To speak to that, Martina has given us a comprehensive list on what we've got behind in the last numerous years. At one time, she was doing the CEO job, the clerk job, the planning job, you know, and while she's doing all these jobs, everything else is falling behind. A lot of these things are set down in the province, so we don't have a choice to do them. So they have to be done at a certain time. And it is a very comprehensive list on what is behind. So I don't think I'd have a problem supporting a full-time job for this one, and it's going to catch up to a lot of things that we're behind on. And as she pointed out, our strategic plan pointed these things out. Our service review pointed these out. So it's not something we're just thinking willy-nilly here. This has been like two different things pushed towards us that we need to do this.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any other discussion on the motion, Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of it. I'd rather see a contracted person. And then after that term then we decide whether we, whether we need to continue on with a full-time person. I just look at the big picture, like, with some staff here, we're soon gonna have to have an addition in the building here. I'm just not in favor of a full-time position at this time.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? And that motion carries, thank you. On to item number 2, operating request for deputy fire chief. Council, what would you like to do with that? Just looking for somebody to start the conversation. Councilor Watt?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. A lot of conversation around this, a lot of talk back and forth. And some municipalities have a full-time, some have a part-time. It's a kind of hit and miss. I myself would like to start out with a part-time 28-hour-a-week one, and have a report come back once Chuck has it all finalized on what the HARBR Human Resources contract would entail. And we can deal with that part of the money later. But I think, you know, for this budget, let's start with that, and then next year that may totally change and go with full time. This first year, I just like to see how this works out with the part time.
So is that a motion?
That's a motion, sorry.
Just clarifying.
I'm gonna second that motion.
Councilor Johnson will second that motion. Any discussion to the motion? Deputy Mayor Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just see us as kicking the can down the road further. Chuck's workload has over doubled since he has come here as the chief. And I just, for the amount of money that we're talking about, it's very small. It's very small, guys. And like, do we want to be an employer that hires people and gives them a job, a good job? Or do we want to be something that it's all under contract? People do not stay under contract. They're looking for opportunities in other places. And I can tell you, we train them, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Well, there goes all the training money that we have spent. 20,000 wouldn't even cover what time that staff put into a person. And we want them to stay. We want to be a good employer. And they definitely have the work. I believe both these positions, as Martina's position is critical for this organization. So that's my comments, and I believe that we should bite the bullet instead of kicking the can down the road, and get that person in to help our fire department. That's my comments.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments on the motion? I'll speak to it. I go to a degree Deputy Mayor's sentiment where, you know, when you do the math, and I'm going to be looking at the low numbers here, part-time is sitting at $71,000, and we're going to be adding roughly $20,000 for that HR piece, which is going to bring that total salary for a 20-hour employee, effectively part-time employee, to $91,000. And then if we look at the contract 40-hour-a-week employee, it's $93,000 for that role. So in my mind, I would much, and we wouldn't need the $20,000 HR contract. So in my mind, I would much rather provide somebody with a stable 40-hour position, even if it is on a 3-year contract, while we are, I'm assuming a 3-year contract. I shouldn't say that because that wasn't in your report, but on a contract as we're trying to ramp up to this, it makes more sense to just maximize that individual's time if we can hire them and retain them, to Deputy Mayor's point, and leverage that as opposed to just bringing somebody in on a part-time basis. So for that reason, I can't support the motion. But we do have a motion. Councilor Watt?
Thank you, Chair Member. And I know we go back and forth on this quite a bit, but I think that's 71,000. I think it was like 15 off of that for whatever reason, and then we don't even know whether it's going to be 20,000. It was also alluded to that that we may not full-time or even a contract one, isn't really versed in HR, so we still would probably have to use this HR contract to a certain point to, you know, I think that was said earlier tonight too, that it's not, it's probably something that we need to do, not like using HR group to after fire people, so I don't think we're, let's say anything, I'm not on either, but we're gonna need that, so it's not gonna take it away, putting a 40-hour week person in, it's not gonna take away that HR thing from what I undertook from previous speaking, so yeah, so if we play that one by ear, we don't know how it's gonna be, and take the 15,000 off the 71, that does knock us down quite a bit.
I believe in the report, Councillor Watt, the asterisk is beside the part-time role, specifically saying that if a part-time position is chosen by council, then we would request adding the volunteer firefighters to the human resources contract at an estimated 20,000 a year. That asterisk does not apply to the contract full-time role, so we wouldn't, according to the report, need that in my line. And the 15,000 is money that we're already paying for that individual to fill the role on that volunteer honorarium basis. So again, if that individual is hired in a contract position, that 15,000 would come off the top of that. It doesn't matter what position they're filling. That's part of what's already budgeted for that position. So in my mind, that doesn't make any difference, because if they come in part-time or full-time, we're still already budgeting $15,000 for somebody to fill that volunteer role. And we don't need that $15,000 in that volunteer role further, but unless the deputy or unless the chief wants to clarify further, perhaps I'm misunderstanding.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to add context, I think you have it correct. The comments back to Councillor Watt, maybe when we talked about the HR consultant, that was for the part-time position only, not on the full-time. We did talk about, obviously in HR, we don't have a significant amount of needs in HR all the time. And HR companies, I'm going to say they'll be more efficient at HR responsibilities than my staff would be, but that's maybe where that confusion was. But we've been doing it since the beginning of time that we've started. So that wasn't really what we would be looking at if we had a full-time position. We wouldn't be asking for that support. They're just separate. Like we're just, the reason why we added it in was because we're in a deficit of hours. So trying to unload something to somebody else that can be more specific for that role, that's the concept that we're looking at.
And to the 15,000?
Yeah, the 15,000 would come off any amount. It's the same across the board. So these numbers, and that's where it's hard to reflect. That's why I kind of want to speak to it. The same as we spoke with Paul earlier, is that the budget that we proposed was on our typical budget. And then this was like a recommended add-on, if you will. So we didn't change the numbers in the original budget to reduce our firefighter wages by 15,000, anticipating that we were going to get a full-time until we knew where we were going. But if you decide to pick any of these, you can reduce $15,000 off of any of those amounts.
Thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor. Are there comments or discussion on the motion?
Yeah, just a question now. What we have for the request here is for 122,000. So then therefore, are we just simply saying the 15,000 we want that?
Chief, sorry.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Johnson. Yeah, so the preliminary numbers we put in the budget were 122,000. I'll let the treasurer speak to those in details, but I think we've slimmed that number down to, I'm going to say 112 and stand for correction, based on collecting more information, doing the full payroll analysis and the actual costs. So that number would be down to, I believe, 112. I'll be standing corrected by our treasurer, and then we would reduce 15,000 off of whatever that number is. If it's 112 or whatever our treasurer says, but I believe that's the number. So yeah, it would be 15,000 off of that.
Mr. Kramer?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the chief is correct. So we were able to review the wage in comparison to some other surrounding municipalities. The first number, the number that's on that chart was an estimate with the information that we had. We were able to get some more detailed information from our colleagues and other municipalities, other fire departments. And so we were able to narrow that down to the 112. Now the range that is provided in the chief's report is dependent on who is ultimately the successful candidate. The low end does not include owners. Depending on who is the successful candidate, they may not enroll. And then the high end would include the owners, which is mandatory to offer if they're eligible.
Thank you for that, Randy. Any other discussion on the motion? So just to recap right now, we do have a motion on the floor to hire a part-time deputy fire chief. That's the motion. Now, all in favor? And that motion carries. Fails, sorry. I was like mathing, right? I'm like, wait, how do we do this now? That motion fails. So, entertain another motion. Councilor Watt?
No, I just have a question if I may. So with only 4 of us here, how is this gonna work? Because if the deputy mayor makes the opposite motion, so we got, we don't agree with it, we're stuck with it.
Let's just see what happens.
Then what do we do with the, on to our next meeting when we have 12 or 5 or?
Let's see if we have a motion that's gonna come forward, and then we'll figure out where we get there, but we'll put extra pages to figure it out.
Nothing's gonna tell us.
So does anyone want to make another motion? Anyone else?
I'm gonna do exactly what Councilor Watt said. I'm gonna make a motion to, that we, hire a full-time deputy chief and, carry on with the recommendation.
Does anyone want to second that motion? So that motion doesn't get seconded. Does anyone want to make a motion? Councilor Wong?
I was gonna say, or do you have somebody take the chair and you second it? or-
No, I actually don't want to second that motion.
Fair enough.
Um,
Okay, I want to put this to bed, and I know I made the first one, if you don't mind, to be Madam Mayor. Still not 100% sure that I want to go with full-time at the moment. I'd like to feel this one out and just see where it goes for this budget. So I will make the motion that we do the contract 40-hour week one for the 1 year, and just see where it goes, and we'll address it with next year's budget.
okay, so what?
And it doesn't say that 1 year, but I want to put that 1 year in there, or, yes.
Okay. Anyone want to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Deputy Mayor will second that. Any discussion on the motion to hire a full-time contract deputy chief for 1 year? All in favor? And that motion carries. There we go. We can have four.
Didn't want one, you didn't want 3. Thanks, everybody, appreciate it.
Thank you for that. I was gonna say, I was looking through my notes, so Councilor Johnston and then over to Mr. Kramer.
I just want to make a comment for the public. Maybe we could tell them how much that would be.
Mr. Kramer?
Through Madam Mayor, Councilor Johnston, the contract, so the budget impact, the range is going to be 78,656 to 86,927. For the purpose of budgeting this year, given we are already 2 months in, I would propose to include the low end of the range. And then if we need to adjust, obviously it's a contract, and it will be coming back as part of next year's budget. But it would be safe to put the lower end. We can maybe have some offline discussion how to approach as we finalize the budget document and finalize the numbers exactly. We may be able to prorate that depending on start date, depending on the hiring process. And given its contract, I typically don't like to prorate positions if they are full-time permanent. as you're just pushing down the increase to a future year. However, given this is contract, that may be prudent, so we can look at prorating going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Councilor Watt. Oh, sorry, no, Councilor Johnson, you were going to say something, or did you?
No, I did.
You did, okay, sorry, Councilor Watt.
Thank you, to you, Madam Mayor. Is this a process that we have to advertise it, and it's a very specific project or position. Our deputy chief currently already does it, and I'm not saying that he wants a job. I don't know for a fact, but I'm just thinking Chuck may already have someone within the organization who's already been trained, already has all the experience and everything that we need for this position, and it's a contract position. Do we have to put that out to the public, or is that something we can do in-house because it is a contract?
Does anyone want to talk about that?
Sorry, no, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
but
my
it's-
guess is
it's-
it would be posted internally at a minimum, and externally at the same time, but it could be launched.
Through the mayor to the members of council, I would agree with the mayor's comment that probably we would start with an internal posting at the bare minimum, but probably internally, but recognizing that we have a number of volunteers who are trained through the department and may be qualified to do some of this work. We may need to go outside the organization, recognizing that it is a contract for 40 hours a week. But that's probably where we would start with the internal.
Councilor Watt.
Thank you for following that. And that's where I always like being with in my. It was always post internal first. Any job come up, I post internal first. If there wasn't qualified candidates, then we went to the outside, unless it was a management position. So, you know, that was, but for anything other than management position, that's kind of where I like to see it. Let's do internal first and then move to external if necessary.
Okay, thank you for that. So we did call vote, we landed on that, we're good. Mr. Kramer, I believe there's another item that you wanted to address in your report for budget 2025. And that is the records retention project. Go on.
To you, Madam Mayor, as you mentioned and I presented in my report, the recommendation is to allocate the remaining modernization funds to the records retention project that will be completed in 2026 and 2027.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. And just so that I'm clear, the records retention project was something that came to us in the draft budget document, but we had pre-committed the first year of that, or we made the commitment to the long-term project, but we hadn't had the subsequent funding confirmed. I'm confused.
No, that's fair. To you, Madam Mayor, the project is included in the budget. It is a 3-year project. The 2025 cost was already had funding from the modernization fund. So the impact to the 2025 budget for this project to the levy was 0 because it's being funded from the modernization fund. However, by approving the project, it was committing future years levy funds to complete the project in 2026 and 2027. So this recommendation should cover those years and then allow us to complete that project without committing future levy for this project.
Thank you for that clarity. And then just speaking about the comment that was made earlier about possibly funding elevator upgrades or repairs through the modernization funding program. If we were to make the follow through on your recommendation to fund the records retention project in the amount of $31,000 through the modernization funding, would there be any remaining funding that could be allocated?
There would be no funding through the modernization fund. There's other reserves available, but that we could also reallocate at a future time once we bring that report forward. Given we're dedicating funds to future years, we could reallocate those funds.
Understood. Thank you. Councilor Watt.
That's for you, Madam Mayor. And I was the one that brought that up, so thank you very much for remembering that. But it's 6 1 half dozen the other. So if we allocate this money to the record retention, stuff like that, which is fine, I don't have a problem doing that. And then when we find out what the elevator budget is, we look after it then. If we take this money and put towards the elevator, we gotta come up with the other money, so it doesn't make a difference really, either way. I'd rather just leave it this way right now, and I will make that motion to leave it this way right now. And we'll worry about the elevator once we get a total cost on it and find out where we're gonna go from there.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that the motion that you're about to make, leave it this way, you mean have years 2 and 3 funded, like the $31,000 funded to
Yes.
modernization funding? Okay, thank you. So that,
Yes.
is that your
that's
motion?
my
Are you making that right
yes.
now? Awesome, thank you. Anyone want to second that motion? Deputy Mayor Nelson, discussion on the motion? Councillor Johnston?
Yeah, I'm, through the chair, I'm against that. I think we can, put it towards, as you say, worry about that, the rest of the balance in 2026. My objective on the whole thing here, that we try to be as most reasonable as we can with the budget, that we can get it down to a very, livable percentage at the end of the day. You know, I look at it, and what we do every year we go on here, and we come up with 6 and 7%, whatever. And we made comment back years ago that we, yes, we did keep it down to 2 or 3%. And so many words, maybe we got behind. But the thing is, we live with the day and we support our people. And like I say, even if it's 6% now, whatever be, you put that over 2 or 3 years, now it's 20%. So I mean, you know, it just every year is more and more and more. And we can't lose sight of that, I'm just not in favor of keep adding everything that we do it. Somehow or other, we've got to live with what we got. And if we can use this other fund, this my fund, I would say, then let's use it. And we worry about the, when we come down to the elevator, we will worry about where we're going to take that, whether it be from reserves or whatever. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? I'll just speak to this as well. You know, knowing that the records retention project is a 3-year project, I think committing to funding it through the modernization funding will give stability to the project so that it can go forward. And if we can use that for the next 2 years and know that that's taken care of, then staff can confidently move forward with that work as opposed to waiting each year for us to get to the next level of the budget to come back to request that because we can't commit that. So I think using modernization funding to create that funding stability for a 3-year project that will allow staff to build momentum. And sometimes, as you know, start-stops cost a lot of money in projects. So if they can just continue on with that over 3 years and knowing that that's ready, then they can perhaps move forward more quickly with that project, but also perhaps move forward more economically because they're not going through the starts and stops. So I support the motion to pull that full 31,000 from the modernization funding as well. Councilor Watt?
One last comment, thank you, Chief Madam Mayor. And this modernization funding can only be used for specific, it does have a criteria for it, like, you know, so it's hard to say whether we have much on the budget we could actually apply it to bring it down this time. So that's kind of where I'm going with it too. We know we're gonna get this project finished with that funding, and we'll worry about other things as they come up and we pump that.
Okay, so all in favor?
Let's get you to
Councilor
the
Johnson?
chair, can I get you to do the motion, please?
Sure. I think the batteries, something's going wrong with that.
Maybe.
I saw the lights.
Okay.
We'll get the clerk to reread the motion.
So the motion moved by Councillor Watt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mulder, is that modernization funds are used to pay for the records retention project, given the impact on the levy.
Okay. So with the motion on the floor, all in favor? And that motion carries. Mr. Creamer, how are we doing with the budget?
Chief Madam Mayor, there's no remaining items in terms of motions or recommendations from staff that need to be addressed specifically. At this time, it would be council's option to make any further motions or requests at the the staff.
Okay, council, anything else on budget? Anything further that we want to request or acknowledge? Councilor Watt?
Not request to acknowledge, just each and every one of our managers and senior staff. Thank you very much for everything you've done for this budget. It's never an easy process for us, when we make decisions based on what we think is the best, and there's a lot of people don't agree with us, but we have to keep this township going at a specific level, and to do that, that's our job. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. So I don't believe we need a motion to, or do we? We didn't really move to receive all those reports inclusive. Okay, so a motion then to receive the treasurer's report, the chief's report, the clerk's report, the mayor?
Sorry, just
Oh,
through
sure.
the mayor, just one last question. Could we ask for what that percentage is now? Or maybe you don't know that yet, Paul, or?
Mr. Gerber?
Yeah, so, through Madam Mayor, I caution that this is draft as I'm, making changes on the fly here. But based on, what I'm showing in the amounts that have been approved this evening, the percentage increase is 6.4%.
And the average median, do you know what that would be? Oh, sorry, Ryan. I'm sorry. Sorry. Back to you.
Okay, we can bring that back. Thank you very much. We were just looking for now a motion and to receive the reports from the fire chief, from the clerk, and from the treasurer. It was moved by Councillor Watt, seconded by Councillor Johnston. All in favor? Motion carries. Moving on to Councillor Watt. Okay.
Oh, free to go.
Yeah, probably not. Managers at this
It's been a long
point
day for all of us, I think.
can probably carry on, certainly at your discretion, if you have nothing else coming forward. So we are now moving on to committee minutes and other reports, and we do have item 11.1, the Township of Douro-Dummer Library Board minutes. Just a motion to receive those. Deputy Mayor Nelson, seconded by Councillor Johnston. Any discussion? All in favor? And that motion carries. Our February 12th committee of the whole minutes, motion to receive and approve those. Councillor Watt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? And that motion carries. On to correspondence. We have 3 items, starting with 12.1, the County of Peterborough and Town of Hanover regarding the imposition of tariffs on Canada. Council, what would you like to do with that? Councillor
Move to receive the report.
and seconded by Councillor Watt. All in favor? That motion carries. Item 12.2, the Town of Coburg regarding municipal restructuring study. Deputy Mayor Nelson,
Move to receive the report.
seconded by Councillor Johnston. Any discussion? All in favor? That motion carries. And then lastly, I just wanted to, I held, lastly under correspondence that is, I held the 7.2 notice of public open house and public meeting so that we could discuss. I just want to highlight the importance of the public meeting that's happening and that notice. This has been a lengthy process with our official plan, and of course the township's official plan is part and parcel of the counties. That was a decision that was made long before this term of council. There have been concerns in the past about the agricultural mapping and the natural heritage mapping for Douro-Dummer specifically. That mapping will come into effect once the official plan is adopted. And this council, as recently as February and March of 2022, had acknowledged by way of motion and discussion that that agricultural mapping, we know that it's not accurate, but it's also out of our control because that was done by province and it's their mapping that needs to be taken into consideration. As I mentioned, as recently as February, March of 2022 rather, this council did flag that information and sent it on to the county for consideration for inclusion in the official plan or recognition. I believe that information was then submitted to the province, who out and out rejected those recommendations based on what we know on the land, right? And their people said that it wasn't appropriate. So what I'd like to do, and I'm bending the rules a little bit, not really, it's in the rules, it's just not something customarily that we do. I'd like to make a motion from the chair that we forward once again to the County of Peterborough our resolution from March 15th and February 15th of 2022 respectively, that highlights our concerns with the agricultural and heritage mapping, and that it be included with the submission of comments from our municipality to the county regarding the official plan. And I hope that a member of council would support me on that.
Thanks.
I'll support that.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. So I made.
Before you made the motion,
Yeah.
I thought you were just rocking and rolling.
Yeah. Thank you. So Deputy Mayor is seconding that. Any discussion on that, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. I also want to encourage all council. I think it'd be great if we actually attended the open house and in support of that motion. And I think that's, and all of our taxpayers. I believe that this is their chance to maybe have a say. They'll probably turn it down, but at least we can be on a unified front on that, on this. Now's the time to speak up. If I could say
It's the
that.
last and final time.
Yes,
we need
that's
to- And thank you. I just wanted to look up the date and time. So that is
March
happening
4th, I believe.
March 5th
Oh, sorry.
at 9:30 as part of
Yes,
county council meeting that day. So to highlight that important date. CAO Davis.
Just also, there's a public open house on February 25th. It's also a good opportunity.
Thanks very much. That's like another one. So any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? That motion carries. Thank you very much. I appreciate your support in that. So on to item 13, our bylaws. Of course, we already addressed 13.1 earlier, so just 13.2 to designate the site plan control area as noted. Motion, Councillor Watt, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Johnston. Any discussion? All in favor? And that motion carries. We have no reports derived for previous notices of motion. Any notices of motion? Seeing nothing, any announcements? Councillor Watt?
I do have one. The Lions will be having a
April 26th,
beef
a
dinner
roast beef dinner and auction.
upstairs here, or where is it?
Yes, upstairs
And auction.
and auction.
Again, same last one.
April
$25 a ticket. Notify Ray or myself.
Thank you very much.
She hit that the other day.
Any other announcements? Seeing nothing, we have no closed session, so simply the confirming bylaw. Councillor Watt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson, all in favor, that carries. And of course, our next regular council meeting is on March 4th, same time, same place, and a motion to adjourn. Councillor Watt, seconded by Councillor Johnston, all in favor, and that carries. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great night.